Gabriel Kingsley stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, staring out at the sprawling city below. New York, with all its lights, noise, and endless movement, seemed like a reflection of his life. He had everything he could ever want: wealth, power, respect. Yet, despite it all, there was an ache inside him, a gnawing emptiness that never quite went away. At 35, Gabriel had already achieved what most could only dream of in a lifetime. He was the CEO of Kingsley Technologies, a multi-billion-dollar tech empire that revolutionized industries. His name was synonymous with success, and the world knew him as a titan of the business world. His days were filled with meetings, strategies, and decisions that shaped the future of his company. But as he stood there, looking out at the horizon, he couldn't shake the feeling of isolation that had settled deep within him. He had no real friends, no family to call after a long day. His relationships, if you could call them that, were fleeting, superficial. People only saw him for his power, his position, his wealth. Nobody ever saw the man behind the suit, the man who was often overwhelmed by the very empire he had created. Gabriel's thoughts were interrupted by the ping of his phone. Another reminder that work never stopped, never paused for personal reflection. He picked it up and saw the name Maya Hart, a name he had seen mentioned in several high-profile business circles recently. Maya, a rising star in the world of environmental consulting, had been recommended as someone who could help his company transition into more sustainable business practices. She had recently been invited to one of his board meetings, and her firm was now a potential partner for a new green initiative Gabriel was spearheading. Gabriel sighed and ran his fingers through his hair before texting his assistant, "Schedule a meeting with Maya Hart next week. I'll discuss the proposal." He set the phone down, rubbing his eyes. The weight of the decisions on his shoulders was beginning to feel unbearable. It wasn't just the company his heart ached in a way he didn't understand. Success had come at a price he wasn't sure he was willing to pay anymore. The next evening, Gabriel found himself standing in a grand ballroom at a charity gala. The room glittered with elegance, full of New York's finest politicians, celebrities, and business moguls. Everyone was wearing their best masks, pretending to enjoy themselves, pretending to care about the cause they were there to support. Gabriel was one of them, smiling, shaking hands, making small talk. He was a master of the art of networking, but as he walked through the room, he couldn't help but feel more alone than ever. He had agreed to attend this event because it was expected of him to maintain his public image. But tonight, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was surrounded by people who didn't know him, who didn't care to know him. The evening passed in a blur of faces and names, until he found himself standing near the bar. As he ordered a drink, he noticed a woman across the room. She wasn't in the spotlight, didn't seem to be the typical socialite or businesswoman. Instead, she stood in the corner, alone but at ease, scanning the room with a quiet intensity. Her presence was magnetic, yet unassuming. She wasn't dressed in the ostentatious gowns most women wore at these events. Instead, she wore a simple black dress that accentuated her elegance without trying too hard. Her dark hair fell loosely around her shoulders, and her eyes sharp, observant, but soft looked out at the crowd as though she was studying the room, rather than participating in it. Curiosity piqued. Gabriel found himself walking toward her, something drawing him in that he couldn't explain. "Ms. Hart, I presume?" he asked, his voice smooth but with a touch of uncertainty. The woman turned, her eyes meeting his, and for a brief moment, something flickered in the air between them, something he couldn't name. She offered a polite smile. "Mr. Kingsley," she said, her voice calm, confident. "I've heard a lot about you." Gabriel felt a flash of surprise. Most people knew him by reputation, but Maya was different. She wasn't fawning over him, she was simply present. "All good things, I hope." Gabriel replied with a playful smile, trying to mask the intrigue he felt. "All good," she answered with a small chuckle, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she was scrutinizing him in a way few people dared. "But I'm not here to talk business or your company's reputation. I'm here for a different cause tonight." Gabriel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And what might that be?" Maya tilted her head slightly, giving him a smile that didn't reveal everything. "I'm more interested in what you think. Mr. Kingsley, you've built a tremendous empire, but you must have a reason for it, beyond the numbers and the deals." Gabriel was taken aback. Most people wouldn't dare ask him such a question so directly, especially in public. It was a rare thing, someone asking him about his motivations, not his success. His guard went up instinctively, but there was something about Maya that felt different. There was no flattery in her tone, no agenda in her eyes. Just curiosity. "Perhaps," he said, his voice quieter now, "but sometimes I wonder if I even know the answer anymore." Maya studied him for a moment, as though weighing his words. There was something about her that made Gabriel feel both unsettled and drawn in. "Maybe the answer lies in what you're willing to give up," she said softly. "Success is often a lonely road, isn't it?" Gabriel paused. The sharpness of her observation caught him off guard. For a moment, he felt exposed, like she had seen past the facade he so carefully built. "Maybe it is," he replied. "But that's the price of success, isn't it?" Maya smiled softly, her gaze lingering on him as she took a step back. "Perhaps, but there's a difference between paying the price for success and being consumed by it." As the evening drew to a close, Gabriel found himself thinking more and more about their brief conversation. Maya Hart was different, refreshing in a way he hadn't experienced before. She didn't see him as just a CEO. She saw him as a person. As he walked away from the gala that night, the weight of the conversation lingered. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just thinking about the next business deal or the future of his company. He was thinking about something more elusive, the possibility of connection, of finding someone who understood the man behind the title. And as the city lights flickered outside his window that night, Gabriel couldn't help but wonder if he was ready to let someone in. The week after the gala felt like a fog for Gabriel Kingsley. The brief interaction with Maya Hart had stayed with him, and despite his best efforts to focus solely on his work, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Maya was unlike anyone he had ever met, direct, insightful, and refreshingly unawed by his wealth and success. She had seen him for who he truly was, not just the CEO of Kingsley Technologies, and that terrified him. He had spent years building walls around himself, surrounding himself with people who either admired him for his business acumen or were afraid of his power. But Maya had simply asked him to look beyond the surface. She hadn't flattered him, nor had she tried to manipulate him. She had only asked him to reflect. And for the first time in years, he actually did. That Friday afternoon, his assistant knocked on his office door, pulling him from his thoughts. "Mr. Kingsley, Maya Hart is on the line. She's asking if you're available for a quick chat. She says it's about the project we discussed," she said. her voice professional but with a slight note of curiosity. Gabriel felt a pang of uncertainty, something he hadn't expected. He had been thinking about their conversation all week, and the idea of speaking with her again felt different. "Send her through," he replied, trying to hide the unease he felt at the thought of hearing from her so soon as the call connected. Maya's voice came through clearly, with no hesitation. "Mr. Kingsley, I hope I'm not interrupting," she began, her tone warm yet professional. "I wanted to discuss the details of our potential collaboration. There are a few key aspects I think we need to consider if we're going to move forward." Gabriel leaned back in his chair, his mind still partly clouded by their previous conversation. He couldn't help but find her directness intriguing, but he also wasn't prepared to dive back into their professional relationship without addressing the other things that lingered between them. "I'm glad you called," Gabriel said, trying to focus. "I've been meaning to discuss the details as well. I think your firm could play a critical role in the sustainability initiative we're pushing forward. Let's talk specifics." The conversation turned professional as the two of them dove into the logistics of their potential partnership. Maya's insights were sharp, and her perspective fresh compared to the corporate minds. He was used to working with impressed Gabriel more than he had anticipated. It was clear that she wasn't just another consultant. She understood the long-term vision he was striving for, beyond just profits, but amidst the talk of contracts, environmental goals, and corporate partnerships. Gabriel couldn't shake the thought that this was the first time in a long while that he felt truly heard, not as the CEO, but as a person with genuine concerns and aspirations. There was something about Maya that made him feel comfortable, like he didn't have to maintain the polished, controlled persona he had spent years perfecting. "Let's set up a time to meet next week," Maya said, pulling him back to the present moment. "We can finalize everything and discuss the next steps. And, of course, I'll be happy to address any concerns you might have about the project." Gabriel nodded, feeling his mind clear slightly. "I'll make time." And Maya, ... "Thanks for being so direct." "I appreciate it." There was a slight pause on the other end of the line before she responded. "I'm not here to play games, Mr. Kingsley. I think we both want the same thing, a lasting impact. So, let's get to work." The call ended, and Gabriel sat there for a moment, absorbing everything she had said. It wasn't just about the project anymore. He realized that their connection, while still professional, had evolved. He didn't know what it was yet, but it was undeniable. The next day, Gabriel found himself thinking about Maya again. He was back in the office, dealing with the usual barrage of emails and meetings. But as the day wore on, he found his thoughts drifting back to her, the way she looked at him, the confidence in her voice, and the way she made him feel like he wasn't just some businessman, but a person with emotions and desires. Later that afternoon, his assistant informed him that Maya had requested a face-to-face meeting next week to discuss the finer details of the partnership. Gabriel felt a strange pull at the thought. Was he looking forward to seeing her? Of course, he was. But it wasn't just for business anymore. He couldn't deny that there was something else he was curious about, something that had nothing to do with work. The week went by in a blur, and soon it was time for their meeting. As he walked into the sleek, modern conference room where they had arranged to meet, Gabriel noticed Maya already seated at the table, reviewing some papers. She looked up when he entered, her expression neutral. But there was something in her eyes, a kind of quiet confidence, that made him pause for a second. "Mr. Kingsley," she greeted, standing up and extending her hand. Good to see you again. Gabriel smiled, shaking her hand firmly. It's good to see you too, Maya. They both sat down, the conversation quickly turning back to business. But as they spoke, something shifted between them. There was a familiarity now, something comfortable that hadn't existed before. They weren't just talking about business anymore. There was an underlying current of something more. They both knew it, but neither of them spoke it aloud as the meeting wrapped up. They exchanged pleasantries before standing up to leave. I'll have the finalized documents sent to you by tomorrow, Maya said, her tone professional yet warm. I look forward to seeing where this goes, Gabriel. He couldn't help but smile at the way she said his name. It wasn't just business anymore. There was a spark between them, undeniable and real. I look forward to it too, Maya, he said, his voice low as they walked out of the conference room together, side by side. Gabriel realized that what had started as a professional relationship was now something much more complicated. But for the first time in years, he didn't mind the complication. In fact, he was beginning to welcome it. The following week passed in a blur of meetings, emails, and preparations for the global expansion project. Yet, despite the demands of his work, Gabriel couldn't seem to stop thinking about Maya. Their interactions, although mostly professional, had taken on a new dimension, and he was keenly aware of the subtle shifts in their dynamic. There was a connection between them, spark, that was difficult to ignore. Maya had become more than just a business consultant. She had become someone Gabriel found himself looking forward to seeing. She was sharp, articulate, and knew exactly how to challenge him in a way that no one else could. But it wasn't just her intellect that drew him in. It was the way she made him feel like he could be something more than the sum of his accomplishments. He had always prided himself on being a man of control, his company, his empire, his reputation. Everything in his life had been meticulously planned, from his morning routine to the way he conducted his meetings. But when it came to Maya, he felt like he was losing that control. And for some reason, that terrified him. It was a Thursday afternoon when Gabriel found himself once again staring at his phone, contemplating whether to call Maya. They hadn't spoken since their last meeting, and although they had exchanged several emails, Gabriel felt that there was something more he needed to address. He hadn't realized it until now, but the professional connection he had with her was starting to feel like something deeper. With a deep breath, he hit the dial button, his finger hovering just above the screen before finally pressing it. The phone rang once, twice, then her voice. Gabriel, Maya greeted, her voice calm yet warm. What's up? He smiled to himself, despite the weight of the conversation he was about to start. I've been thinking. I know we've been caught up in the project, but I feel like we need to talk about other things. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, there was a hint of curiosity in her voice. Other things. Gabriel leaned back in his chair, trying to find the right words. He wasn't sure what he was about to say, but something inside him urged him to say it anyway. Yeah, I feel like there's something between us more than just business, he said, his voice steady but uncertain. I can't ignore it anymore, Maya. Can you? There was silence on the other end, and for a moment, Gabriel thought she might hang up or deflect, as people often did when faced with honesty. But then she spoke, her voice soft, measured. I didn't want to bring it up, Gabriel. I wasn't sure if you felt the same way, Maya admitted. But yeah, I feel it too. I can't pretend I don't. The way we've been working together, it's more than just a professional relationship now. and I think we both know it." Gabriel's heart raced, and a wave of relief washed over him. He hadn't expected her to admit it so openly, but hearing her say it out loud felt like the first step towards something real. "Then what do we do with it?" he asked, the uncertainty still lingering in his voice. Maya's response was simple, but it carried the weight of something important. "We decide what we want. But, Gabriel, we have to be honest with ourselves. If we're going to go down this road, we can't hide from it. We can't pretend it's just business anymore." Gabriel let her words sink in. He had spent his entire life building a successful empire, putting everything else aside to achieve his goals. But now, standing at this crossroads with Maya, he realized that he didn't want to keep living in isolation. He didn't want to continue the charade of having everything but missing the one thing that really mattered: genuine connection. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice low and steady. "One step at a time." "No pressure." "I agree," Maya replied softly, her voice filled with understanding. "One step at a time." That evening, as the call ended, Gabriel found himself staring out at the city skyline once again. This time, however, he wasn't just thinking about the business deals or the next big project. He was thinking about Maya, about what she had said, and about the possibility of something real between them. But there was still a part of him that hesitated. He couldn't just throw everything away for something that might not work. He had built his life around the idea of success, of control, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to give that up for love. The following day, the tension in the office was palpable. The final stages of the project were approaching, and with it, the pressure of launching it on a global scale. Maximilian's voice carried through the hallways as he spoke with various teams, delegating responsibilities, making sure everything was aligned. It was the same old routine, but something was different. He found himself distracted, his mind drifting to Maya and their conversation from the night before. Sophia, noticing the change in his demeanor, raised an eyebrow during one of their brief meetings. "Maximilian," she said, her tone carefully neutral, "you've been off lately. Is everything all right?" He paused for a moment, caught off guard. He hadn't realized how much he had been letting his thoughts wander. His mind had been so consumed with Maya, with their connection, that he had stopped focusing on the details of the project. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to make a choice. He couldn't keep this tension between his heart and his ambitions. "I'm fine," he said, forcing a smile. "Just a little tired, that's all." But deep down, he knew that wasn't the truth. He was tired, yes, but it wasn't just from work. It was from keeping a part of himself hidden, his vulnerability, his emotions, his desire for something real. He didn't know how long he could keep this up. The next few days were a blur of meetings and final adjustments. But the unspoken connection between Gabriel and Maya remained in the background. Their interactions were still professional, but every word, every glance seemed to carry a deeper meaning. Maximilian had known for a long time that success didn't guarantee happiness. But now, for the first time, he was beginning to wonder if it could. Could he have both? As the final presentations for the project loomed, Maya sent him a message. "I think it's time we talk about what happens next. Let me know when you're free." Gabriel sat at his desk, staring at her message for several moments. He didn't know where they would go from here, but he knew one thing for sure: he was ready to face it. He replied simply, "I'll meet you tonight. Let's talk." The days following Gabriel and Maya's admission of feelings for one another felt like a whirlwind. Their professional relationship continued to flourish, as did the global expansion project. But there was an undeniable undercurrent of something more between them, something neither of them had expected, and certainly weren't prepared to navigate. Gabriel found himself more distracted than usual. He couldn't focus on the minutiae of corporate decisions the way he used to. Every time he met with Maya about the project, he was aware of the unspoken tension between them. Every glance felt loaded with meaning. Every word they shared had a deeper undertone. He had tried to compartmentalize his feelings, pushing them aside, but now it was impossible to ignore. Maya, too, was struggling. She had always prided herself on her independence and control, but since meeting Gabriel, things had started to shift. She had never expected someone like him, powerful, driven, and complicated, to disrupt her carefully curated world. And yet, he had. She wanted to believe that they could keep things professional, but the more time they spent together, the harder it was to separate the personal from the professional. The pressure was mounting on both of them. The launch was drawing nearer, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Kingsley Technologies was at a critical juncture, and Maximilian's role was pivotal. He couldn't afford distractions, especially not when it came to the complex, high-risk decisions he had to make. But Maya was no longer just a colleague. She was someone who had begun to take up more space in his thoughts, in his heart. And he wasn't sure how to balance that. It was a Friday afternoon when Sophia, Gabriel's trusted assistant, walked into his office with a concerned expression. "Mr. Kingsley," she began, pausing just inside the door, "I think you need to take a look at this." She handed him a report, but the expression on her face told him it was more than just business. Gabriel took the report, scanning the contents quickly. His mind was still partially on the conversation he had with Maya a few days ago. The weight of what they had said, what they were about to embark on, felt like it was hanging over him. He couldn't ignore it anymore. "This is about the expansion in Europe," Sophia continued. "It's going to be a massive undertaking. There are a lot of concerns about whether we can meet the targets. We may need to shift focus for the next quarter if we want to stay on track." Gabriel felt a knot in his stomach. The weight of responsibility for Kingsley Technologies had always been heavy, but now, with the added complexity of his personal life and feelings for Maya, it felt unbearable. He rubbed his eyes, exhaling deeply. "Set up a meeting with the board for next week. I need to reassess the strategy. Tell them we'll discuss possible changes." Sophia nodded, but before she left, she hesitated. "Mr. Kingsley, if I may, are you sure everything is all right? You've been distracted lately. Your decisions are starting to affect the team." Gabriel looked up at her, surprised by the directness of her words. But he knew she was right. He wasn't the same, and he wasn't sure if he could balance everything. "I'm fine, Sophia," he said, forcing a smile. "I just need to take a step back and rethink things." That evening, as Gabriel sat in his penthouse, he reviewed the data Sophia had given him. His phone buzzed, and he glanced down to see a message from Maya. "Gabriel, I've been thinking. We need to talk. Can you meet me at 9? The weight of those few words hit him hard. He hadn't expected this, but he also knew it was coming. The conversation about where they were heading, about what this thing between them meant, couldn't be avoided anymore. He couldn't hide behind his work forever. He typed quickly, his hands betraying his nerves. "I'll meet you at 9. When he arrived at the cafe where they had agreed to meet, the atmosphere felt different. The usual bustle of the city seemed muted, as if the world itself had paused for this conversation. Maya was already there, seated at a small corner table, her eyes focused on something distant. When she looked up and saw him, she offered a small, guarded smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Gabriel sat down across from her, his mind racing. He wasn't sure how to start, but the silence between them felt too heavy to bear. Maya, he stopped himself, searching for the right words. I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about where we're going with this, and I'm not sure I can keep pretending like it's just about work anymore. Maya looked at him, her gaze intense but unreadable. I know, I've been thinking about it too. Her voice was steady, but there was something vulnerable in her eyes. Gabriel, I care about you. I really do. But I also know that I can't ignore what's happening with this project. We've been juggling so much, and I'm starting to feel like something's got to give. I'm starting to wonder if I'm the one who has to give up. Gabriel's heart sank at her words. He hadn't expected her to feel this way. He had been hoping that they could balance both their professional and personal lives. But it was clear now that the weight of the project, combined with their emotions, was pulling them in different directions. I don't want you to feel like you're the one who has to give up. Maya, he said, his voice quieter now, but I don't know how to make this work. I don't know how to make us work without it affecting everything else. Maya's eyes softened, and she reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. The contact was brief, but it was enough to make his heart race. Maybe we can't make it work right now, she said, her voice full of understanding. But we have to be honest with ourselves, Gabriel. We've been avoiding this for too long. Maximilian looked down at their hands, feeling the weight of her words. I can't afford to lose this project, Maya. I can't afford to fail. And I can't afford to lose you either. Maya withdrew her hand slowly, her gaze steady. We need to make a decision, Gabriel. What do we want? Because right now, we're both standing at a crossroads. The weight of the conversation lingered in the air as they sat in silence. Gabriel knew she was right. Something had to give. Whether it was the project or their relationship, they couldn't keep trying to juggle both without consequences. As the night stretched on, neither of them spoke about what came next. But Gabriel knew that when the morning came, they would both have to face the reality of the choices they had to make. Their journey professionally and personally was at a breaking point. The following days felt like an emotional whirlwind for Gabriel and Maya. After their conversation in the cafe, the weight of their words lingered, and both of them were left with more questions than answers. They had come to a crossroads where their growing feelings for each other conflicted with their professional lives, and both knew that something had to give. For Gabriel, the stakes were higher than ever. He had built Kingsley Technologies from the ground up, pouring his soul into its success. It was his life, his identity. The thought of losing that was unthinkable. Yet, the thought of losing Maya, the one person who had made him feel like more than just a CEO, someone who had made him see beyond the boardroom, was equally terrifying. But the reality of the situation was impossible to ignore. The global expansion project was at a critical juncture, and his leadership was needed more than ever. He couldn't afford to take his eye off the ball. But how could he do that when his heart was divided? That Thursday afternoon, Gabriel found himself alone in his office, staring at the multiple reports spread across his desk. The latest financials, the projected numbers for the next quarter, the deadlines for the new product launch, all of it was swirling around in his mind. But none of it seemed as important as the conversation he had with Maya the other night. The phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a text from her. I think we need to talk about where we go from here. Her words felt like a punch to the gut. They both knew what this was, an inevitable conversation. Neither of them could ignore the pull between their emotions and their careers. But what was the right decision? Gabriel stood up and walked over to the window, staring out at the skyline. It had been a long time since he felt this conflicted. He had always prided himself on being decisive, on controlling every aspect of his life. But now, with Maya in the picture, nothing seemed simple anymore. He quickly replied to her message. "Meet me at 8 tonight. Let's figure this out." That evening, when Gabriel arrived at Maya's apartment, he was met by the quiet stillness of the space. Unlike his penthouse, with its grand view and polished furnishings, Maya's apartment was cozy and minimalist, with warm lighting and personal touches that made it feel inviting. She was waiting for him by the window, her back to him as she looked out at the city. There was a sadness in her posture, a weight that Gabriel couldn't ignore. "Maya," he said, his voice softer than he expected. "We need to talk." She turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions and certainty, frustration, and something deeper. "I think we've both known this conversation was coming," she replied, her voice steady. "I can't keep pretending that this isn't affecting me. It's affecting both of us." Gabriel nodded, his chest tight with the weight of the moment. "I don't want to lose you, Maya," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I also don't want to lose everything I've worked for. The company, my legacy. It's everything to me." Maya took a deep breath, stepping closer to him. "I get it, Gabriel, I do. But what if there's more than just success? What if the price of success is more than we're willing to pay? We've both spent so much time focusing on our careers, but at what cost? What about us? What about what we have?" Gabriel felt the truth of her words hit him like a wave. He had always seen his career as the ultimate goal, the ultimate success. But now, standing here with Maya, he realized that maybe he had been running away from something more important, the possibility of love, connection, and balance. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared that if I let you in, everything I've worked for will fall apart. I've put everything into this company, Maya, and I don't know if I can walk away from it." Maya's eyes softened, and she reached out, placing her hand on his. "I'm not asking you to walk away from anything, Gabriel. I'm asking you to live a life that's fuller than just business. I'm asking you to let someone in, to let me in." Gabriel looked at her, and for the first time, he felt the walls he had built around himself start to crumble. He had been so focused on success, on control, that he had forgotten how to be vulnerable, how to truly connect with someone. "I don't want to lose you, Maya," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "But I don't know if I can balance it all." She smiled softly, squeezing his hand. "You don't have to do it alone, Gabriel. We can figure it out together. One step at a time. I'm not asking you to make a decision overnight, but I want to be with you. I believe in us." For the first time in weeks, Gabriel felt a sense of clarity. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't willing to let Maya go without trying, without seeing where this could lead. The conversation shifted back to the project, and the tension in the room lightened as they discussed strategies and the next steps for the company. But now it felt different. The undercurrent of their personal connection was no longer hidden. It was real, and both of them knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Later that night, as Gabriel walked out of Maya's apartment, The uncertainty he had been carrying for so long seemed to dissipate, if only for a moment. He had made the first step. He had chosen to open himself up, to take a chance on love. As he stood outside in the cool night air, he realized that success didn't have to come at the expense of everything else. It didn't have to be the only thing that defined him. There was more to life, more to him, and for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to embrace it. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. Gabriel and Maya had agreed to take things one step at a time. But the complexity of balancing their growing personal relationship with their professional commitments became more challenging than either had anticipated. The global expansion project was in its final stages, and every decision felt like it could determine the future of Kingsley Technologies. Maximilian's responsibility was overwhelming. It wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about his legacy. The pressure to succeed was suffocating. And yet, every time he thought about Maya, he couldn't help but feel a sense of calm, like maybe, for the first time, he was doing something for himself. Something outside of the boardroom, but balancing it all was hard. Every moment spent with Maya made Gabriel realize how much he had been missing out on life's smaller joys. However, as they spent more time together, the boundaries between work and love became increasingly blurred. It wasn't just business discussions anymore. Every meeting, every strategy session felt like it was charged with something more, something personal. One evening, as Gabriel sat in his office, reviewing the final reports for the project launch, he couldn't shake the feeling of exhaustion. He had spent the last few months working round the clock, and his mind was reaching its limits. He knew he needed to make decisions, but the weight of everything, the company, the project, and now Maya was beginning to feel like it was all collapsing onto him. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. A message from Maya, dinner tonight. He smiled to himself, feeling the familiar warmth spread through him. The thought of spending time with her was a welcome distraction, but at the same time, he felt the tug of his responsibilities. Could he continue to divide himself like this? Could he keep pretending everything was under control? He typed back quickly, "I'll meet you at 7, but we need to talk." At 7 p.m., they met at a quiet restaurant they both enjoyed. It wasn't a fancy place, but it was cozy. Something about it felt like home. Maya was already seated at a corner table, her back straight and her focus on the menu, but when she saw him, her face lit up. She looked as calm and composed as ever, but Gabriel could tell there was something different about her too, on unease. A subtle tension beneath the surface. He sat down across from her, feeling the weight of the conversation they had to have. "How's the project going?" Maya asked, her voice light, but there was a clear note of concern. Gabriel ran a hand through his hair. "It's moving forward, but we're running out of time. The pressure's building, and I'm feeling it. I can't seem to shake it, Maya. Every decision, every move I make, it's like I'm carrying the weight of the company on my shoulders." Maya leaned forward, her eyes searching his. "You've been working non-stop. You need to take a break. You can't keep pushing yourself like this, Gabriel. It's not sustainable. And it's not just about the project. It's about you. I can see it." Gabriel exhaled slowly, glancing down at the table. He wanted to be strong, to keep everything together, but Maya's words hit too close to home. He had been so consumed with success, with pushing harder and harder, that he had forgotten what it was like to simply live. "I know," he admitted, his voice quiet. "I know it's not healthy, but I don't know how to stop." If I let go of this, I'm afraid everything will fall apart. The company, the launch, and even us. Maya reached across the table, gently placing her hand over his. Gabriel, she said softly, you can't keep carrying this burden alone. You're not just the CEO. You're a person with feelings, with a life outside of business. I'm here, and I want to support you, but you need to make a choice. You can't keep running yourself into the ground. Gabriel looked up, his heart heavy with the truth of her words. He knew she was right, but he also feared that if he let go, if he didn't focus all of his energy on the company, he might lose everything. The thought of stepping back, of delegating more, scared him more than anything. I want to find a way to make it work, Gabriel said, his voice tight with emotion. But I'm scared that I'll lose everything, my career, the company, and ... us. Maya's expression softened. I'm not asking you to abandon your career, Gabriel. I know how much it means to you, but you can't keep sacrificing everything for it. What good is success if you're alone? What's the point if you lose yourself along the way? Gabriel's mind raced. The weight of his choices, the responsibilities he had carried for so long, felt heavier now. But Maya's words cut through the noise in his head. He realized that he didn't want to keep living like this, not just for the company, but for himself, for them. As the night wore on, they continued talking. But this time, it wasn't about the project. It was about what came next. It was about them, about figuring out how to balance their careers and their relationship later. As they left the restaurant, Gabriel stopped in front of the door, turning to face Maya. I don't know how to do this, but I'm willing to try, he said, his voice steady. I want us to work. I want to find a way to make it all fit together, my career and you. But I need your help. Maya smiled, squeezing his hand. We'll figure it out, together. As Gabriel walked back to his apartment that night, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in weeks. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time, he realized that he didn't have to carry everything on his own. With Maya by his side, maybe, just maybe, he could find that balance. He could still have the success he desired, but he could also have a life worth living. For the first time in a long while, Gabriel felt hopeful. The weeks following their conversation were a test of Gabriel's resolve. He had promised Maya that he would try to find balance between his ambition, his career, and their relationship. But every day felt like a tug-of-war between the drive that had made him successful and the yearning for something deeper, something more personal. Maximilian threw himself back into work. The final phase of the global expansion project was drawing closer, and there was no room for error. His team was counting on him, and every decision he made carried weight. But as he found himself engulfed in the hustle of it all, the strain of juggling work and Maya began to feel heavier. He was torn between two worlds, the one where he was a powerful CEO with a legacy to uphold, and the one where he was a man trying to find love, connection, and balance. Maya, on the other hand, had stepped back to give Gabriel space, though the strain between them was becoming apparent. She had always been fiercely independent, and while she understood Gabriel's commitment to his company, she couldn't ignore the growing distance between them. She couldn't help but wonder if their relationship was becoming one-sided, with her putting in the effort while Gabriel remained consumed by his work. It was a Tuesday evening when Maya received a message from Gabriel. It was simple, direct. Can we meet tonight? I need to talk. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't heard from him in a few days, and while they had exchanged messages about work, there hadn't been much else. The emptiness she had been feeling, the questions about where they were heading, came rushing back. Maya knew this conversation would be important. Whatever it was Gabriel needed to say. She was ready to listen, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was a conversation neither of them wanted to have. She quickly replied, "Sure, 8 p.m. at my place." "Perfect. I'll see you then." That evening, Maya waited for Gabriel, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation. When he arrived, there was a new weight to his presence. His face was drawn, his usual confidence replaced with something more vulnerable. "Maya," he greeted, his voice soft but full of meaning. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Maya smiled faintly, trying to ease the tension she felt. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Gabriel walked over to the table, his posture rigid as he sat across from her. He didn't speak immediately, as if weighing his words. Maya could see the internal struggle on his face, the conflict he was battling between his feelings for her and his obligations to his company. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice quieter than usual, "about us, about what we're doing, and I realized something. I've been so consumed by work, by the drive to succeed, that I've neglected something that I didn't even realize was so important." Maya's heart tightened in her chest. She had known this was coming, but hearing him say it out loud still felt like a punch. "And what's that?" she asked softly, though she feared she already knew the answer. "You," Gabriel said, his eyes meeting hers with sincerity. "I've been so focused on the project, the company, the future, but I've been ignoring the one thing that could make it all worth it. You and me. I've been running from what we have, because I didn't know how to make it work with everything else." Maya felt a wave of emotion rush over her. She had known this, had felt this distance between them, but hearing Gabriel admit it felt like a release. The walls she had been building around herself, trying to protect her heart, started to crumble. "You don't have to choose between us and the company," Maya said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I understand how much Kingsley Technologies means to you, but we both know that we can't keep pretending like this. You can't keep ignoring us, Gabriel." Gabriel's expression softened, his shoulders relaxing as he let out a breath. "I know," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pouring everything into work and leaving you behind. I need to be honest with myself, Maya, and with you." Maya looked at him, her heart both heavy and full at the same time. "So, what do we do now?" she asked, her voice quiet but full of hope. Gabriel's eyes met hers, and for the first time in a long while, there was a sense of clarity in them. "We take a step back, look at everything, and figure out what matters. I've been living my life as though success was everything. But now I realize that without you, without a life outside of work, it means nothing." Maya smiled, the tension in her chest easing. "I don't want to make you choose, Gabriel, but we can't keep living in this limbo. I need to know that we're on the same page, that we're not just going through the motions." Gabriel nodded, his expression serious. "We are on the same page. I want this, Maya. I want us, and I'm willing to make sacrifices, if that's what it takes." As the evening drew to a close, Gabriel and Maya sat in silence, processing everything that had been said. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. For the first time in a long while, Gabriel felt the weight of the world lift from his shoulders. He had made a choice not between his career and love, but to find a balance between both. As Maya walked him to the door, she looked at him, her gaze soft. "We'll figure it out," she said, her voice filled with quiet confidence. Gabriel smiled, a sense of peace settling over him. Together, as he stepped out into the cool night air, he realized that while the road ahead wouldn't be easy, he had made the right choice. He had decided to take the leap, and for the first time, he wasn't afraid. The weeks following Gabriel and Maya's decision to embrace both their professional and personal lives were filled with a mixture of excitement, uncertainty, and growth. They had agreed to take it one step at a time, knowing that balancing both love and ambition was no small feat. But each day, it became clearer that the foundation they were building together was stronger than either of them had expected. For Gabriel, the shift was profound. He had always believed that success was measured in terms of business achievements, profits, growth, and power. But now, with Maya by his side, he realized that real success wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the connections he made, the moments he shared with people who mattered, and the willingness to be vulnerable in a way he never had before at work. The final preparations for the global expansion were underway. The pressure was intense, but for the first time in a long time, Gabriel didn't feel overwhelmed. Maya was there, not just as a colleague, but as someone who understood the emotional toll of the decisions he had to make. They worked together, their professional relationship stronger than ever, and their connection only deepening with each passing day. One morning, as Gabriel sat in his office, reviewing the last minute details for the launch, he received a message from Maya. It was simple, but it made his heart race. "We did it. The project's officially a success. Thank you for everything." He couldn't help but smile at her words. They had done it. Together, the global expansion had been a success, and it had been accomplished with both of them working side by side, not just as business partners, but as something more. Just as he was about to reply, his phone rang. It was Maya calling. "Good morning, Gabriel." Her voice was warm, but there was a note of excitement in it that caught his attention. "Good morning, Maya. I saw the news." "It's official, then." "Official," she confirmed. "I wanted to be the first to tell you. It's a huge win for the company, but it's also a huge win for us. For everything we've been working toward." Gabriel leaned back in his chair, his heart swelling with pride. "We did it," he said softly, "and it's all thanks to you. You've been my rock through all of this." There was a pause on the other end, and then Maya's voice came through, softer now. "We've been each other's rock, Gabriel. You've taught me so much about business, but more importantly, you've taught me about balance, about what really matters." He smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "I never thought I could have both my career and someone I care about. But now I know I can. And it's because of you, Maya. You made me believe that I don't have to choose." Maya's voice softened with emotion. "I'm glad we found our way, Gabriel. I'm glad we didn't let fear or uncertainty hold us back." Gabriel looked out the window, the city below him a testament to everything he had worked for. But now he saw it through different eyes. It wasn't just about the view or the success. It was about the journey, about the person standing by his side. He wasn't alone anymore. "I couldn't have done this without you, Maya. And I don't want to," he said quietly. "I don't want to do it without you either," she replied, a smile in her voice. "So, what's next for us?" Gabriel took a deep breath, feeling a sense of clarity he hadn't had before. "Next, we keep going, together. We keep growing the business, and we keep making this works, the company, our lives." I want it all, Maya, and I want to do it with you. Maya laughed softly. I think that sounds perfect. That evening, after a long day of meetings, Gabriel found himself sitting at his favorite spot in the apartment by the window, overlooking the city. Maya was beside him, her hand resting in his as they looked out together. They had come so far, and yet Gabriel felt like they were just getting started. Here we are, Maya said softly, her voice almost a whisper. Here we are, Gabriel echoed, squeezing her hand. And this is just the beginning. He leaned in, brushing a soft kiss on her forehead. For the first time in his life, Gabriel felt that he was exactly where he was meant to be. He had the company, the success, but more importantly, he had Maya. The balance he had once thought impossible had now become a reality. And as they sat there together, Gabriel realized that success wasn't just about conquering the world, it was about finding the right person to share it with.